There are plenty of builds out there in Elden Ring. Some of them overpowered, some of them, well, useless. But no other build can come close to how much damage you get using this one. Just be sure to get every item in this list, as each item works in harmony with the other, and they all begin stacking, making you more powerful with each swing. So firstly, let's talk stats. These are my stats. Obviously you don't need to copy them completely, but it's worth putting as much as you can into Arcane and Vigor, with Mind and Dex being a secondary thought. Everything else is up to you. For this build, you're going to want the Scavenger's Curved Sword. This is actually an incredibly simple weapon to find. It isn't hidden behind a boss or a ridiculous labyrinth of a dungeon. It's just outside, sitting on a dead body, and you can find it right here. You're going to need 2 of these. There are a few ways to do this. If you're in New Game Plus, it's likely that you would have picked one up in your travels before, so you'll simply need to head over and grab it again. If not, we have a video on duplicating weapons and runes. I'll link it in the description. And we have a Discord filled with hundreds of Elden Ring players looking to duplicate, trade, and fight bosses together, so definitely get some help in there. Now that you've got your curved swords, let's talk Ash of War and Infinities. So the curved sword already does bleed damage, which is great. The high arcane we talked about earlier is going to help give that a little boost too. So for Ashes of War, I put Bloodhound Step on my right and Seppuku on my left. A lot of people would argue Seppuku should be on both, but I like to zip around using this build, especially when fighting the bigger enemies. You will thank me later when you do this. For affinities, you're going to want to choose a cult for both weapons. This means that your swords will now scale with arcane. That high level arcane is really going to come in handy. For your head, you'll want to use the white mask. This boosts damage when blood loss is in the vicinity. This boosts your damage by 10%. To get the white mask, you'll need to do Vare's quest line and be rewarded with the Pure Blood Knight's medal. Use it to teleport and fight the 3 invaders in the blood pool. I got the full armor set from the second invader. For the chest, you'll want the Raptor's Black Feather armor. This enhances jump attacks, which is exactly what we'll be doing. This boosts damage by 15%. You can get the Raptor's Black Feather armor here. We actually have a video that goes into more detail on where to find it. I will also link that in the description. For your hands and feet, choose anything that offers a nice chunk of damage negation without causing you to fat roll. I went with Malekith's armor here. All of these talismans are useful and contribute towards insane amounts of damage, so don't skip any of these. Firstly, we have the Lord of Blood's Exaltation. This, like the white mask, boosts damage when blood loss is around. This gives us an extra 20% damage. With the white mask, this gives you a total of 30% boosted damage when there's blood loss in the vicinity, which, FYI, will be the whole time. You can get the Lord of Blood's Exaltation here. Secondly, we've got the Claw Talisman. This gives you a 12% boost to jump attacks, which means in total you'll be receiving a 27% bonus every time you jump attack, which, FYI again, will be the whole time. You can find the talisman here. We also have a video that goes into more detail. I'll leave it in the description. The Rotten Winged Sword Insignia, which greatly raises attack power with successive attacks, which, guess what, it's going to be the whole time. The attack boost will start at 6%, but keep climbing to a whopping 22% attack boost with each hit. To get this talisman, you'll need to get to the end of Millicent's questline and help her defeat her sisters. And finally, you'll want Millicent's prosthesis, which boosts dex by 5 and increases attack power with successive attacks. The attack boost starts at 4% and eventually goes up to 11 with each hit. To get this talisman, people seem to think that you need to get to the end of Millicent's questline and kill her, but you can actually get it earlier by killing her at the Windmill Heights Site of Grace after killing the Godskin Apostle. The Green Burst Crystal Tear is incredibly important to use here. It boosts stamina recovery speed, which will help out a lot considering we're going to be jumping and swinging our swords around. The second tier is incredibly important. It ties all of this together beautifully. All of the other equipment you'll be wearing gives just under a 100% boost to your damage. You'll also be using Seppuku on top of this. And remember that your weapons are set to the occult affinity, which, if you set your stats right, will already mean crazy damage for your dual swords. Well, this tier, the Thorny Crack tier, makes consecutive attacks grow stronger the longer they continue. Meaning each time you hit the enemy, the damage increases on top of the 100% damage boost from everything else. I'm pretty sure there are more intricate and impressive ways that these items are stacking together, but I don't have a calculator to hand and you don't care. So let's just say big damage. So how does this build work? Well, before you walk into the boss room, get seppuku done, drink your flask of wondrous physic, head in and just start jumping at the boss and hitting L1 for PlayStation and LB for Xbox. This hits the boss with an attack that strikes them 4 times, which triggers everything you're wearing related to successive attacks. The seppuku and the natural blood loss of the curved swords will trigger everything you're wearing that boosts attack power when blood loss is in the vicinity. Your high level arcane will boost that as well as the sword's initial damage due to the occult affinity. And then the jump you're doing before the attack is triggering everything you're wearing that boosts jump attacks. With each jump strike you'll do more and more damage, and it should only take a few hits to take down your enemy. And as a very helpful tip to all the viewers that have stuck with me, use the Mimic Tier summon with this build. The fact the summon has all of this equipment as well doubles the rate in which you kill the bosses. Not only are they a great distraction for letting you get in those extra hits, but they are great at keeping the blood loss going for your attack buffs. Enjoy the build and have fun. For anyone out there that wants to get a little more villainous and Star Warsy, this build is definitely for you. Not only does it look really cool in action, but it actually dishes out crazy damage extremely quickly. So let's talk stats. Arcane, arcane, arcane. I don't care what else you put your stats into, whatever your arcane is, it's not enough.
Pump those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers in this racket.
Weapons. For that glowing red double-bladed lightsaber look, and for crazy damage, you're going to need Eleonora's pole blade. You can get that right here. Maybe get yourself a seal as well. This way you can use Flame Grant Me Strength for even more damage. Armor. Okay, so you've got a tough choice to make here. You can either wear a black hood or no helmet at all to look the part a little more. Or you can choose to buff your damage with the white mask. It boosts attacks when blood loss is in the vicinity, and considering the pole blade inflicts blood loss, your damage will get boosted big time. I'll let you make that choice. Secondly, this choice is a little easier. You'll need the black feathered armor as it boosts jump attacks, but thankfully it's basically a black cloak, so you won't need to make any compromises here. For the arms and legs, go for something that gives a decent amount of armor without causing you to fat roll. I went for Malekith's armor. Great Rune. As you'll be dishing out a lot of damage very quickly, you won't have much time to block or heal, so be sure to go for Malenia's Great Rune. This will actually heal you when you land hits on enemies. Wondrous Physic. In your flask of Wondrous Physic, you'll need the Thorny Crack tier. This boosts successive attacks and keeps stacking after each hit. You can find the Thorny Crack tier here. Secondly, you'll want the Flame Shrouding Crack tier, which will boost the fire damage inflicted by the pole blade. You can get the Flame Shrouding Crack tier here. Finally, let's talk talismans. Firstly, you'll need the Shard of Alexander. This boosts attack power of skills by 15%. To get this talisman, just get to the end of Alexander Warrior Jar's questline. If you're nowhere near close to getting this talisman, you could replace it for the Twin Blade talisman, which boosts your final hit in a Twin Blade combo by 20%. You can get that here. You'll also need Millicent's prosthesis. This boosts dex and successive attacks. You can get this by getting to the end of Millicent's questline and choosing to kill her. You can actually also get this sooner by killing her when she shows up at the Windmill Village Site of Grace. Next is the Rotten Winged Sword Insignia, which boosts successive attacks as well. You can get this by getting to the end of Millicent's questline and choosing to help her, but if you haven't hit New Game Plus and you only have one of Millicent's talismans, swap out the one you don't have for the Godskin Swaddling Cloth talisman. This restores HP with successive attacks, and you can get it right here. Finally, you'll need the Lord of Blood's Exaltation. This boosts attack power whenever blood loss is in the vicinity, and you can get this right here. So how does it work? Once you've got everything, simply cast Flame Grant Me Strength and drink your Wondrous Physic. Once you use the skill on the pole blade, you'll land multiple hits. This will trigger your talismans and your crack tier. You'll inflict blood loss and fire damage, which will activate the mask, the crack tier, and the Lord of Blood's Exaltation. And the jump from the skill will trigger your Raptor's black feathered armor. This will all continue to stack again and again until your opponent drops, and you'll look pretty badass doing it. Enjoy the build and have fun. It's time to destroy everything in Elden Ring in literal seconds. This build is insane for bosses and PvP, and since the weapon in question got a buff recently, which makes it even quicker, why wouldn't we take advantage of this build? You're going to want to put a majority of your points into Arcane and Mind for this build. If you're sticking at level 150, try and get around 45 points into your Arcane. Weapons. You're going to need Mohg's Sacred Spear. We've all seen bleed builds with this, but trust me, it gets crazy. You can get the spear from Mohg's Remembrance after defeating him. You'll also need a seal just to use a couple of incantation buffs. Spells. For spells, you'll need the incantation Flame Grant Me Strength, which you can get here. And you can also go ahead and pick up Golden Vow for an extra boost in your damage output, and you can get that here. Wondrous Physic. For the Wondrous Physic, you'll want the Flame Shrouding Crack tier, as the weapon skill on Mohg's Spear does fire damage. So this is gonna buff it considerably. You can get this tier here. Secondly, you'll want the Opaline Bubble tier. This is the tier that puts a damage reducing bubble around you, effectively giving you one free hit without taking any real damage. This is pretty useful as we'll be using Mohg's weapon skill, which can leave you open to attacks. You can get the bubble tier here. Armor. For armor, you'll need the White Mask, which boosts damage whenever blood loss is in the vicinity, and there's gonna be a ton of it. You can get the White Mask by defeating one of the 3 White Mask invaders. For the rest of your armor, just pick something that will give you a decent amount of protection. I went for the Tree Sentinel armor. Great Rune. For the Great Rune, you'll want to use Mohg's Great Rune, which gives you a huge blood loss buff to your summons, and you'll be summoning in your Mimic tier, which will already be doing crazy damage because they'll be using everything you have. Then finally, let's talk talismans. Firstly, you'll need the Shard of Alexander. This boosts attack power of skills. To get this talisman, just get to the end of Alexander Warrior Jar's questline. Then you'll want the Ritual Sword Talisman, which boosts attack power when HP is at maximum, and you can get that here. You'll then need the Fire Scorpion Charm, which raises fire attacks. This will give your attacks a huge boost. You can get the Fire Scorpion Charm right here. Then finally, you'll want the Lord of Blood's Exaltation, which will boost attacks when blood loss is in the area, and we've already established that there's gonna be loads of that. When you've got all your items together, head into the boss room, call your Mimic in straight away, use your buffs, drink your Physic, and then get to work. Enjoy the build and have fun.
Extraordinary. The mark of a true lord.
For everyone that hates the Rivers of Blood users in PvP and wants to beat them at their own game, this is for you. They will not see this coming at all. Alternatively, if you're just looking to rinse a boss easily and spamming Rivers of Blood is getting a bit boring for you, this is also for you. Although it works like Rivers of Blood, this new Rivers of Poison build has enough variety to keep the game fun and keep your PvP opponents guessing. And here is exactly what you need. So firstly, let's talk stats. For this build, you're going to want to focus on Arcane for that poison to pack a punch, then Dex as your weapon scales primarily with Dex, and finally Mind. You don't have to go crazy with Mind, I personally stack it, just because I'd like to have more health flasks and not have to rely on refilling my FP every 2 seconds. Try to have a decent level of vigor too if you're going to be going into PvP fights. It also doesn't hurt to have a few points in endurance. Everything else stat-wise is up to you. For this build, you're going to want the Nagakiba Katana. It's the insanely long one with more range than a bow and arrow. It's actually super simple to find. It isn't hidden behind a boss fight or the far end of an endgame area. It's literally right at the beginning of the game. From the first step site of Grace, simply run over to Murkwater Cave. You'll be invaded by an NPC. If you leave it long enough, a hunter NPC called Yura will spawn in to help. After killing the invader, Yura will be standing against the wall to the north. Kill him and he'll drop the Nagakiba. You're going to need 2 of these. There are a few ways to do this. If you're in New Game Plus, it's likely that you've picked one up in your travels before, so you'll simply need to head over and grab it again. If not, we have a video on duplicating weapons and runes. I'll link that in the description. And we have a Discord filled with hundreds of Elden Ring players looking to duplicate, trade, and fight bosses together. So definitely go and get some help there. Now that you've got a pair of swords taller than you, let's talk Ash of War and affinities. So the Nagakiba actually does a good amount of bleed damage, which is a great little boost. The high arcane we talked about earlier is going to help boost that, as well as the poison you'll be adding later. For Ashes of War, put double slash on your right hand. This will imitate the exact movement that the Rivers of Blood does. For the affinity, you're going to choose poison, obviously. And on your left, this is going to be your secret weapon that catches enemies off guard. Equip the spinning slash Ash of War and choose the poison affinity again. This is great for enemies that try to close the gap and get real close. Simply one hand your left Nagakiba and spam the spinning slash Ash of War for an easy kill. You can find the double slash Ash of War in Celia Understair. Just climb on top of the route that spans the town and run to the west. You'll see one of those bugs, just kill it, and then boom, you've got it. Then for the spinning slash Ash of War, it's sold by Knight Bernal at the War Master's Shack for 1,200 runes. You can find the shack here. That high level arcane and dex we talked about earlier is really going to come in handy for both Ashes of War. For your head, you'll want to use the Mushroom Crown. This boosts damage when poison is in the vicinity. It will boost your damage by 10%. The Mushroom Crown can be found on a corpse hanging off of a pillar ruin in the southeastern corner of Lake Rot, right here. For the chest, hands and feet, you're going to want something to give you a decent poise level without causing you to fat roll. I went with the Crucible Knight Armor, but anything will do. The reason for the high poise is due to being vulnerable when doing the spinning slash attack. However, not that many players will be able to hit you because this attack is more likely to break enemy poise anyway. All of these talismans are useful and contribute towards insane amounts of damage, so don't skip any. Firstly, we have Radagon Saw Seal. This gives a +5 to the attributes Vigor, Endurance, Strength, and Dex. The trade-off here is that you take an extra 15% damage, but you're not going to get hit very much. You can get a hold of the Saw Seal at Fort Faroth in Caelid right here. If you don't like the idea of 15% extra damage, I'd suggest swapping out Radagon's Saw Seal for Millicent's Prosthesis. This boosts successive attacks as well as dex. You can get this by killing Millicent at the Windmill Village site of Grace during her questline, or siding against her at the end of her questline. Secondly, we've got the Kindred of Rot's Exaltation. This gives a 20% boost to attacks when poison or rot is in the vicinity. Spoiler alert, there will always be poison or rot in the vicinity. You can get the Kindred of Rot's Exaltation from the Kindred of Rot in Seathwater Cave, located here. Then we've got the Shard of Alexander, which greatly raises the attack power of skills, which again, we're always going to be using the skills. To get the Shard of Alexander, you'll need to do his questline. The final location for Alexander will be in the crumbling Farah Missoula. I won't spoil how you get it, but have fun. Finally, you'll want the Rotten Winged Sword Insignia, which greatly raises attack power with successive attacks. The attack boost will start at 6% but keep climbing to a whopping 22% with each hit. The Rotten Winged Sword Insignia can be earned by siding with Millicent at the end of her quest in the Haligtree. For your Great Rune, go for Godric's Rune, as this boosts all of your attributes by 5, and you really can't go wrong with that. The Stone Barb Cracked Tear is incredibly important to use here, as it helps with breaking enemy poise, and whenever you use the spinning slash attack, this is going to double your chances. The second tier is even more important, and it ties all of this together beautifully. The Thorny Cracked Tear makes consecutive attacks grow stronger the longer they continue, which is exactly what you're going to be doing the whole time. This will stack on top of the near 100% damage boost you're getting from everything else. I'm pretty sure there are more intricate and impressive ways that these items are stacking together, but I don't have a calculator to hand and you don't care, so let's just say big damage. So how does this build work? Well, before you walk into the boss room or start swinging your sword at an enemy player, drink your Wondrous Physic and you're ready to go. Start spamming L2 for PlayStation or LT for Xbox. This will use the double slash Ash of War. It hits the enemy with an attack that strikes them 4 to 5 times. which triggers everything that boosts successive attacks. The poison caused by the swords will also kick in, and that will trigger everything that boosts attack power when poison is in the vicinity. Your high level arcane will then boost that, and the small amount of blood loss on the swords. And then, your secret weapon, switching to your left blade and spamming the spinning slash Ash of War, will also trigger everything, but it will also break the enemy's poise, which is made even easier thanks to the stone barbed cracked here. And then spamming it again will likely kill your opponent before they even know what hit them. If they do manage to get out alive, they'll be heavily poisoned. With each strike you do, the more damage you'll do, and everything will continue stacking, so it'll only be a matter of time before you win the fight. And as a very helpful tip to anybody that has stuck with me through this guide, when playing on your own, use the Mimic tier summon with this build. The fact the summon has all of this equipment as well doubles the rate in which you kill bosses. Not only are they a great distraction for letting you get in those extra hits, but they're great at keeping the poison going for your attack buffs. Enjoy the build and have fun.
If you wanted to kill your enemies by making a tree grow out of the ground, impaling them to death, or watch them freak out as their health steadily ebbs away, if you answered yes to either of these questions, then a death build could be for you. In this video, we are looking at both Destined Death, think Malekith, as well as the build-up of the status effect Death Blight, those irritating frog goblins that's you haunting my dreams since Dark Souls 1. Let's get into what you need. Stats. In order to use everything on this list, you'll need at least a faith of 47, intelligence of 23, a dexterity of 25, and a strength of 10. Boosting dex further will help with damage, but you'll need a good amount of vitality, mind, and endurance to keep you moving freely and able to take a couple of hits as well. Weapons. First up, the Eclipse Shottle. This weapon can be found at Castle Sol in the Snowfields and has the ability to buff itself with Deathblight. Grab a second one for huge damage and double the buff. It also has the ability of getting around shields by ignoring 40% of their effectiveness. Subsequent hits, when buffed, will quickly build up Deathblight, as well as a double tap of your special that releases an explosion that does a good amount of damage. You can find it here. Next, the Black Knife. A dagger that hits hard and has the special ability to jump and hit targets with Destined Death, reducing an enemy's health and overall health bar. You can find it here. To cast sorceries, you'll need a staff. Any staff will do, even though the Prince of Death staff that you can find here buffs death spells by 10% and has overall good stats. It won't help as much with this build, as Fierce Mist is the only spell that is a death spell included on this video, but it has no effect on the power of Deathblight build-up whatsoever. You'll also need a seal to cast incantations. Any seal you have already upgraded will do, although the Gravel seal will boost one of your abilities, Death Lightning, as it is a dragon power, so you can use that if you have it or if you want to. You can find that here. Spells. Death Lightning deals lightning damage, which also deals Death Blight, as well as a lingering cloud effect, which also causes Death Blight. Charging the spell up allows for a bigger, more powerful attack, and you can grab Death Lightning after defeating the Lich Dragon Fortis Axe as part of Fierce questline and trading in the Remembrance at the Round Table Hold. Black Blade. Malekith's favourite attack other than flip-de-doos, the Black Blade acts as a more powerful version of the Black Knife's special attack and can sap health over 15 seconds, as well as reducing a player's overall health bar. To get this incantation for yourself, you must defeat Malekith and trade in his Remembrance at the Round Table Hold. Fierce Mist. Fierce Mist releases a cloud of Deathblight, and charging the attack releases a larger cloud. The quickest way to build up Deathblight is with Fierce Mist, and it's always something to cast while you get to work with the hacking and the slashing. You can find it here. Equipment. Raptor's Black Feathers armor is a great addition to this build as it buffs jump attacks, which combined with the double shottles can quickly take down an opponent's health. You can find it here. The sapping damage of the Black Blade or Knife can be buffed with the Sacred Scorpion charm, which is found here, as oddly they are actually classed as holy attacks. The Holy Shrouding cracked here will work too, as well as things like Flame Grant Me Strength and Golden Vow to give you an extra little buff. The other essential talisman for this build is Radigan's Talisman, which reduces cast time. You can find that here. The other two slots are for you to fill yourself, but if you're lacking stamina or health, you might want to pick something to give you a hand there, such as the Erdtree's Favour +2. Once you've gathered all these things, it's time to fight. Lay down as much of Fear's Mist as you can, lead off with some Destined Death via the Black Blade incantation or Knife, and then go to town with your double shottles. Let us know how you get on with the comments, and if you have any tips to become Master of Death.
Until now, sleep builds in Elden Ring have been a little underwhelming. You have the Sword of St. Trina that, let's be honest, sucks. It gives an output of around 60 sleep damage, so you'd have to dual wield if you wanted anything even slightly decent, which would obviously mean running through the game again. There is also a sleep bow build that I do see a lot of, but who really wants to use a bow in Elden Ring? Yeah. So let's talk everything you're going to need for this build. Stats. Arcane, arcane, arcane. I don't care what else you put your points into, whatever your arcane level is, it's not enough.
Pump those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers in this racket.
Weapons. You are going to want to get yourself 2 of the rippled crescent halberds. This weapon scales completely with arcane and when maxed out has an S tier scale ranking. To get this weapon, you can find a group of 3 albinoric frogmen who wield it at the first ruin just to the east of the fallen ruins of the lake, Site of Grace in Leonia. The drop rate is pretty decent. Obviously, if you've cranked up your arcane stat like I told you to, then you'll likely get 2 of the weapons in your first few tries. Armor. For the armor, I use the Mask of Confidence as it boosts arcane by 3. You can obviously use the silver tier mask for an 8-point boost in arcane, but it does cut your physical damage output by 5%. Now, this shouldn't be an issue because our weapons do scale fully with arcane, but you can make that call for yourself. You can get the Mask of Confidence here, and you can get the silver tier mask here. For the rest of the armor, just equip something that offers a decent armor rating without causing you to fat roll. I used Malekith's armor for this, but it is completely up to you. Great Rune. For the Great Rune, we're obviously going with Godric's Great Rune for that extra 5 points in arcane. Wondrous Physic. In your Wondrous Physic, you're going to want the Thorny Crack tier. This will boost attack power with successive attacks. The good news here is there will always be successive attacks. You can get the Thorny Crack tier here. You will also want the Green Burst Crystal tier. This boosts your stamina recovery, which, due to those successive attacks, you're going to need. You can get a hold of the Green Burst Crystal tier here. Talismans. Firstly, you'll need the Shard of Alexander. This boosts the attack power of skills. To get the talisman, just get to the end of Alexander Warrior Jar's questline. You'll also need Millicent's Prosthesis. This boosts dex and successive attacks. You can get this by getting to the end of Millicent's questline and choosing to kill her. You can actually get it sooner though by killing her when she shows up at the Windmill Village Site of Grace. Next is the Rotten Winged Sword Insignia, which boosts successive attacks as well. You can get this by getting to the end of Millicent's questline and choosing to help her. If you haven't hit New Game Plus and only have one of Millicent's talismans, get the Godskin Swaddling Cloth Talisman instead. The Godskin Talisman restores HP with every successive attack you do, and you can get that talisman right here. Then finally, you'll need the Carrion Filigreed Crest, which lowers FP consumed by skills, and you can get this talisman here. Items. In your quick item menu, you'll need as much soporific grease as you can carry. You can craft this after you get the cookbook from the Isolated Merchant located down the east path after entering the Academy of Rea Lucaria. He's just here on the map. So how does it work and why are we choosing weapons with sleep grease over weapons that do passive sleep damage? Because the rippled crescent halberd has an S scaling in arcane, not only do they hit insanely hard when your arcane level is high, but they also significantly boost the amount of sleep build-up to insane levels. I'm talking 2 hits and it's nap time. And even the enemies that aren't as susceptible to the sleep effect are still affected. Some bosses stand there stunned, leaving just enough time for you to hit them again, which snaps them out of it but then puts them straight back in. You have 2 options for hitting the enemies here, L1 for PlayStation or LB for Xbox to hit them with both of your weapons. This is usually what puts the enemy to sleep the quickest. Then once they're out for the count, follow up with 2 taps of the halberd spinning skill for big damage. This works especially well in PvP. As well as the crazy 2-hit sleep damage, these things hit hard. Once you've used your Wondrous Physic, these 3 different items begin stacking again and again with successive attacks, so definitely don't sleep on this build. Now go destroy some unsuspecting players in PvP. Madness is insanely underrated in Elden Ring. Whether you're looking to send players into a maddening death in PvP or to drop bosses in 2 hits, this is the build for you. These are the stats that you're going to want to go for if you're sticking around the PvP meta. Vigor 60, Mind 18, Endurance 9, Strength 16, Dex 42, Intelligence 7, Faith 42, and Arcane 10. For weapons, you'll want to get the Frenzied Flame Seal, which you can get here, and then you'll want Vyke's War Spear, which you can grab from right here. For this build, you can really go for any armor set that you like. You could choose to go for a more tankier build by using the Bull Goat's armor and run it with the Fingerprint Stone Shield, although I imagine you'll need to throw some points into your endurance and strength for this. So I personally went for Malekith's armor and equipped my Seal and War Spear. It's not as tanky, but can still take damage. The first talisman you'll want is Flock's Canvas Talisman. This will boost the potency of your incantations by 8%. You can get that by completing Millicent's questline by killing her. Then when you head back to Gowry, he'll be crying. That's when you know to kill him for the talisman. You'll then want the Radagon Icon Talisman to shorten the time it takes you to cast. You can get that right here. Next is the Shard of Alexander. This will boost the power of your weapon skills, and you can grab that by finishing Alexander Warrior Jar's questline. Then finally, you'll want the Erdtree's Favor +2, which boosts HP by 4%, stamina by 9.6%, and an 8% boost to your equip load. You can get the Erdtree's Favor +2 right here. You'll want to go for Godric's Great Rune to give all attributes a 5-point boost. In your Physic Flask, you'll want the Cerulean Hidden Tear for that 15 seconds of infinite FP. You can find it here. Then you'll want the Faith Knot Crystal Tear. This will boost your faith even further. You can find that right here. For spells, you're going to want the best madness spells the game has to offer, so you can go for a nice little mix of killer spells here, and just switch out the ones you either don't have or don't want. So firstly, you want to go for the Frenzied Burst, which you can get right here, the Flame of Frenzy, which can be found here, Unendurable Frenzy, which is here, the Howl of Shabiri, which you can get here, and finally, Inescapable Frenzy, which you can get right here. Now that you've got everything you need, go and destroy bosses and other players in seconds. Out of all of the popular builds in Elden Ring, Fire seemingly fell behind. Until now. With this build, you're going to be able to one-shot bosses and embarrass people in PvP. This build focuses on Faith and Arcane, so get out that larval tier, head over to Renala, and get your rebirth going. If you're staying at that 150 mark, you're going to want to get as close to this as you can. Vigor 50, Mind 40, Endurance 25, Strength 21, Dex 22, Intelligence 12, Faith 50, and Arcane 50. If you don't care about sticking around the 150 mark, then just sink all of your stats into Faith, Arcane, Mind, and Vigor, and you'll become a one-shot flame god in no time. You'll want to go for Godric's Great Rune, because of course this will give all attributes a 5-point boost. Firstly, you'll want the Dragon Communion Seal. This scales with Arcane and Faith, and you can get that here. Secondly, you'll want the Serpent God's Curved Sword with the Flaming Strike Ash of War. The curved sword will heal you each time you kill an enemy, even if it's in your offhand. You can find the sword here, and you can find the Flaming Strike Ash of War here. Whilst there's nothing to boost fire damage, you can certainly boost the required stats with specific pieces of armor, one of those being the Silver Tier Mask to boost Arcane. The first talisman you'll want is Flock's Canvas Talisman. This will boost the potency of your incantations by 8%. You can get that by completing Millicent's questline by killing her. Then when you head back to Gowry, he'll be crying. That's when you know to kill him for the talisman. To boost that fire damage, you'll want the Fire Scorpion Talisman. That can be found here. You'll also want the Godfrey icon, which raises the attack power of charged skills and spells by 15%. You can get that here. Then finally, you'll want the Erdtree's Favor +2, which boosts HP by 4%, stamina by 9.6%, and an 8% boost to your equip load. You can get the Erdtree's Favor +2 right here. In your Physic Flask, you'll want the Cerulean Hidden Tear for that 15 seconds of infinite FP. You can find that here. And then you'll want the Shrouded Flame Crack Tear to boost your fire attacks, which you can get right here. For incantations, you'll want Flame Grant Me Strength for a boost to your damage, which you can get here. For even more of a damage boost, you'll want Golden Vow, which you can get here. Then Giant's Flame Take Thee, which will be your main attack. This hits really hard. You can find it right here. You want Flame Fall Upon Thee, which can be found here. Then finally, you want Burn O Flame, which can be found right here. Once you've got all of this, it's time to burn your enemies alive. If you want to become an unstoppable force of frozen death, this build is for you. You'll be able to use this to confuse enemies in PvP and kill them quickly, or drop bosses in seconds. We've got all you need. These are the stats you're going to want to go for if you're sticking around the PvP meta. Vigor 60, Mind 40, Endurance 25, Strength 21, Dex 22, Intelligence 75, Faith 12, and Arcane 14. The only real buff to Frost you get from armor is a 10% buff to Cold Sorcery from the Snow Witch hat. You can get that here after progressing through Ranni the Witch's questline. Besides the hat, you can wear whatever you want for this build. I wore Malekith's armor because it's decent, light, and looks badass with the Snow Witch hat. For weapons, you'll want the Clayman's Harpoon, you'll need the Ash of War Ice Spear on there, and you'll need to set the affinities so that the weapon does cold damage. You can farm the Clayman's Harpoon here, and you can get the Ash of War Ice Spear right here. You also want a light weapon, like a dagger, to add the Ash of War Hoarfrost Stomp onto. You can get Hoarfrost Stomp right here. And finally, Lusat's Glintstone Staff, which you can pick up here. The first talisman you'll need is the Spear Talisman, which boosts thrusting attacks by 15%. You can find the Spear Talisman here. You'll then want the Radagon Icon Talisman to shorten the time it takes you to cast, which you can get here. Next is the Shard of Alexander. This will boost the power of your weapon skills, and you can get this by finishing Alexander Warrior Jar's questline. Then finally, you'll want the Graven Mask Talisman for an 8% boost to your spells, which you can get here. In your Physic Flask, you'll want the Cerulean Hidden Tear for that 15 second of infinite FP, which you can get here. Then you'll want the Intelligence Not Crystal Tear. This will boost your intelligence even further, and you can grab that here. You'll want to go for Godric's Great Rune because obviously it gives all attributes a 5-point boost. The spells are the secret weapon for this build, adding an extra layer of potency. When players start to expect the spear, switch over to Lusat's Glintstone Staff and fire off some of those spells to keep them guessing. Firstly, you want Renala's Full Moon, which you can get from Renala's Remembrance after defeating her. Then you'll want Freezing Mist, which you can get here. You'll also want Glintstone Ice Crag, which you can get from here. Then finally, you'll want Zama Ice Storm, which you can get right here. After you've got everything, it's time to freeze your enemies with an insanely powerful build. If you're looking to destroy players in PvP, this build is for you. You'll be able to use this to rip through a team of 3 all by yourself. So, weapons. For your weapons, you're going to want to get the Marais Executioner Sword. You get this from the boss fight in the Shaded Castle. Stats. When the Marais Executioner Sword is at +10, the attributes scalings are B for Strength, E for Dex, and D for Arcane. You'll want to sink most of your stats into these 3 attributes, and then save some points for your Vigor and Mind. Armor. For armor, this completely depends on your stats. If you're in need of an extra boost in Dex, you can go for the Okina Mask, which you get from the Invader in the Mountaintops of the Giants, or if you need a boost in Arcane, you could use the Silver Tier Mask, which you get from the Mimic Tier boss fight. If you're all good with stats, then just pick an armor set that will give you the best defense without causing you to fat roll. I went for the Tree Sentinel armor. Talismans. Firstly, you'll need the Shard of Alexander. This boosts attack power of skills. To get this talisman, just get to the end of Alexander Warrior Jar's questline. You'll also need Millicent's Prosthesis. This boosts Dex and successive attacks. You can get this by getting to the end of Millicent's questline and choosing to kill her, but you can actually get it sooner though by killing her when she shows up at the Windmill Village Site of Grace. Next is the Rotten Winged Sword Insignia, which boosts successive attacks as well. You can get this by getting to the end of Millicent's questline and choosing to help her. If you haven't hit New Game Plus and only have one of Millicent's talismans, you can replace the one you don't have with the Godskin Swaddling Cloth Talisman. This restores HP with every successive attack you do, and you can get this talisman right here. Then finally, you'll need the Carrion Filigreed Crest, which lowers FP consumed by skills. You can grab that here. Great Rune. Of course, if you're being invaded, you'll have the chance to use a Great Rune. And of course, we're going with Godric's. as it gives a boost to all of your stats. Wondrous Physic. In your Wondrous Physic, you're going to want the Thorny Crack tier. This will boost attack power with successive attacks. The good news here is there will always be successive attacks. You can get the Thorny Crack tier here. You'll also want the Magic Shrouding Crack tier, which, if you might not have guessed, boosts your magic attacks. Once you've got all of these items together, you'll now have a ridiculous build ready to shred PvP players. Trust me, you're about to upset a lot of people. Have fun.